Hello everybody, it's Kate Wakelin here from Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia, and it is Friday the 9th of April. I can't believe where the year's going. So it is our weekly Facebook Friday broadcast that we do each week in our private discussion group for people affected by NETs. Welcome to everyone who's joining us live, and also welcome to people who might be catching up later on via our YouTube channel. As I said, my name's Kate Wakelin. I'm the NET patient support nurse with Neuroendocrine Cancer, and you'll see that I do have a guest with me. So I'm really looking forward to introducing Alex a little bit more in a moment. But before I continue, I do want to just acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm broadcasting to you from, which is the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I just want to take this opportunity to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. One of the things lots of you who know me well know about where I live is that it's very much on the banks of the Yarra River, which in the Woiwurrung language is called the Birrarung. And I love to go running along that river and feel grateful and alive and you know, pretty stoked at where I happen to be lucky enough to live. So knowing that everyone joining us is beaming in from all corners of the country, so just wanting to extend that acknowledgement to you wherever you're joining me from, and hoping that you get a chance to, I guess, get outside and enjoy some of the physical environment about where you are too. Just very briefly, it's been a busy couple of days with the coronavirus vaccine situation, and we've had some new data. I think you'd probably have to be living under a rock if you didn't know that there's been some very rare episodes of a very rare blood clotting disorder with the AstraZeneca vaccine for people who are younger. And the scientists have been looking at that data very closely. I guess it's reassuring in a way that knowing that they are monitoring things so carefully that they are picking up these, you know, 1 in 200,000 people events, but it has made them just press the pause button on that vaccine for people under the age of 50. I don't know a lot more about it because it's all being announced in the news as we speak. So we'll let you know as soon as we know more. And this is particularly relevant for people in the phase 1B group in Australia, which includes people who are living with cancer. And I know we've got lots of people in our community who are under 50 who are in that category. It's also relevant for health professionals, so that includes me. Yesterday morning I was thinking, I wonder if there's any GPs in my area giving the vaccine, and this morning I'm thinking, I'm pretty close to 50. I probably could safely do this, but I probably need to wait until we know more information before we can really know. So as soon as we've got more information, we'll get that to you. So I can see heaps of people who've joined us, which is really exciting. Just like any other of our videos, if there's anything in this that this broadcast that makes you feel a little bit stirred up and needing a bit more support, then I'll make sure that my contact details are in the notes from the video. But the other thing is, and this is probably more relevant to when we're interviewing doctors, medical doctors and specialists, but in any situation, if you're regarding your own situation, please do talk with your healthcare team, because we are just talking about things very broadly here. What we know about NETs is that it's an incredibly diverse bunch of tumours, and they behave in really different ways. So we just want to always make sure that for you and your situation that you're talking with your healthcare team. So I think that's all of the disclaimers and news and updates I needed to give you before I hop in and introduce Dr. Alex Page. Now, we had a different Alex join us almost a year ago. So that was Alex Broom, Dr. Alex Broom, and now we've got Dr. Alex Page. I think this must be like a criteria for working on this particular research project, is that your name has to be Alex. So Alex, it's really fantastic that you've joined us. Welcome to Facebook Friday.
Thanks so much for having me, everyone. Appreciate it.
And Alex has been very much a key player in a research project called Precision and the Person, which Alex Broom talked to us about last year. And I'll make sure the link to that video is in the notes, because it's really, actually, I watched it again this morning as I was preparing for today's chat, and just I found it really interesting, just getting a bit of a window into the sorts of things that researchers are really trying to achieve and find out, and the ways they're doing that. And I found this a really interesting research project. And it's fantastic now that a whole lot of data has been collected, including from lots of people with NETs who have been generous enough to share their experiences and thoughts with the team. And Alex is now in a position where we can sort of really start to share some of that data. So I'm so excited. Alex, I'm just wondering if for people who haven't watched the video from last year, and there may well be lots of people who are watching who don't know anything about Precision and the person and thinking, well, what's this about? I'm just wondering if you could give us just a very brief overview of the project.
More than happy to. Before I begin as well, I want to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Gadigal peoples of the Eora Nation, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Second, thanks to you for having a spot to have a chat and also to share some of these findings. Often academics are kind of in glass cages of emotion here, and it's good to actually talk through and get a kind of sense whether it mirrors what's going on. And before I share, thanks to everyone who participated in the project so far. If you're watching now or in the future, we couldn't do this work without you, and I hope it reflects a lot of the confidence that you have in us in sharing some of this stuff, and your strength in putting up with me and sharing some of the heaviest moments. I can just summarize the project pretty quickly. So when we think about cancer, often we think about it through a medical gaze or a kind of biological gaze. It's something that's happening in the body. It's unstoppable growth, it's tumor, etc. But social science thinks about cancer as a kind of socio-cultural event, right? There are many layers to it. It changes our perceptions of time, who we are, our relations to different institutions like healthcare and family. And this project really is looking at the latest treatments in cancer care, often called precision treatments or precision medicine, targeted therapies, immunotherapies, all the way through to CAR T, things like that have come up. And we're really thinking about what the experience of precision medicine is for real people. So instead of thinking about it as Excel spreadsheets and medicalized knowledge, we're thinking about what is it like for a person behind the label of a disease and their family and their entire life to go through the events of cancer in the era of precision medicine. So what does it mean to get a targeted therapy? What does it mean for your family? How do you experience side effects and their variety? How do you think about science, and what's your life been like as you go through it? So we actually don't have any information on this. Worldwide, it's very, very sparse. Despite this is, these treatments are touted as the biggest innovation in cancer in 50 years, like immunotherapy. I know Peter Mac describes it as that, yet collective experiences are pretty lacking. So we get our mics out, we go and talk to people, or talk on Zoom during the COVID era, and we try and really examine that complexity of experience from real people. So that's kind of what the project's about.
Oh, that's really fantastic to hear. And I think you've managed to sum that up in a nutshell far more succinctly than I would have been able to. I wondered how it's gone, like, in terms of how many people did you want to get and how many people actually came along for the ride, and what's it been like? Also, from a COVID perspective, I know you mentioned Zoom, which is a skill set that we've all needed to embrace. But can you tell us, how that's all gone for you as a team?
As a team, pretty well, considering, selfishly, at a research level, pretty well considering what we thought the pandemic would do. If we remember about a year ago, which feels 1,000 years ago, we thought, okay, we're going to go visit multiple hospitals. So we have the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital, Royal North Shore, and obviously Prince Charles. And we were going to go to the hospital and talk to people in the clinic. And for the most part, along with some support from some consumer groups, such as you guys, and stakeholder groups, key stakeholders, and part of our panel. And obviously COVID comes in and just blows that out of the water. So we thought, okay, how can we do this? And Zoom was it. And then we had these kind of doubts about Zoom, if I can be honest. I thought, am I really expecting someone who's gone through something, an event as complex as this, as rich as this, to be able to sit there with me for an hour on Zoom with my pixelated face and have to talk through some really, really intense stuff. And we'll talk about that later as well, I think, with the telehealth, the introduction of telehealth. But actually, it worked out really, really well because I could talk to people around the country. I wasn't stuck on the East Coast where I actually am. I've talked to people in Perth, Darwin, Adelaide, all the way up to Townsville, all the way down to Tasmania about their multiplicity, experiences of cancer of a range of different tumor types. So it's been absolutely awesome. And another thing that's really, really has revealed to me at least is the power of groups like this, and not just Facebook groups, but patient and cancer and genetic subtype specific groups, and how people are learning from each other, banding together, communicating and sharing ideas. And the way a project really can play a role in delivering information back is acknowledging that these communities are doing so much great work for and with each other, right, in a really specific way. So that blew my mind, to be honest. In terms of the face-to-face interviews, we do what are called qualitative in-depth interviews. And in short, it means I'm punishing you for about an hour and we talk through every topic under the sun. Most of the interviews actually went for an average of something like 89 minutes, because once we get into the warm, once we get to know each other, I think it's pretty easy to start talking. And I give full credit to every participant for, the obstacle of Zoom is very real. Virtual and telehealth consultations will tell you that the lack of presence makes things difficult in some ways. And I give full credit to participants for jumping in and helping me and educating me so much and having a chat about this stuff in ways that, have expanded far beyond just the initial, what does precision mean? We ended up with 55 adults living with cancer talking to us, 30 of them lung cancer patients, 15 of them NETs patients, and I think, if I can remember off the top of my head, 5 breast cancer patients. Here we go. 3 ovarian, 1 brain, 1 melanoma, and 1 rare tumor. Look at that.
Can I just say, I think it's the first research project ever where I feel like there's been more people with NETs participating than breast cancer. I think our NETs patients are used to feeling like the people who maybe don't have their voice heard as much as those more common cancers. So that was a really fascinating outcome that they were your numbers. And Chet, can you tell us why? Because you weren't especially targeting uncommon or rare cancers, were you, Alex? It was, you were looking for people with cancer generally to participate. So what was it about things like lung or NETs that meant that people were more likely to, or, participated?
It's a really good question. And I think it comes down to snowballing. So our study isn't about getting specific numbers to make a specific significant finding in a statistical sense. We're looking for people who want to share their story, people who want to share their voice and have something interesting to say about a particular topic and want to tell us what's going on. And the research naturally, it naturally mapped to strong communities of people who, so first this is what happens. You get someone participate in the interview, and I think they're doing a bit of a litmus test of me and the team. They're like, what's this about? Because you guys must just get smashed by interview requests or research requests all the time. And if things go well, I think when you have a tight-knit community and you can share the information about a project and the opportunity to share what's going on, I think that's why you see, in this case, lung cancer patients and NETs patients really getting involved, because these are complex stories. They're often on the margins of when we think about cancer culturally. And here we have a chance to talk about it in depth for an hour with someone who's I'm genuinely interested and I want to know what's going on. So I think these types of things kind of come together in a beautiful way. And then you have, 15 completely different yet parallel stories going on about NETs, for example. And just blows your mind. So I think it's just naturally kind of rolled out.
Yeah, okay. And I think you're right. I'm glad that you see that power in the community like this, because that's something that I observe every day, is the value of patients being able to really connect with each other and sharing, over, often years of living with a NET diagnosis. Our patients have a huge amount of expertise. They actually end up often, I feel like, knowing just as much about their cancer as their doctors often do. So there's a lot of technical knowledge shared in groups like this, but also that lived experiential support, that get it factor, I think, is really gold. You can't bottle that and put it in a pill and give it to someone, but I feel like it's incredibly valuable for people to be able to share.
Mm.
I'm just wondering, so tell us about, you said that, some of the insights blew your mind. I am so interested to get into, so what did you find out?
Okay. If I can be honest with yourself and everyone, when I was asked to do this, I went into academic insecurity mode, and 600,000 words of data got turned into another 1,000 slides, because of course that's what academics do. So I've managed to reduce it down quite a bit. What if I just take you through some of the greatest hits, just some of the really interesting quotes, and they're fully anonymized. And I want to let everyone know as well, as with our publications, that I'm using a broader term of NETs here, but obviously the complexity within even NETs is crazy. But it's just because we want to anonymize and protect people as much as possible, while also balancing that with insight. Why don't I share my screen? Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Alex.
All right, great. Hang on. This is my favorite bit of Zoom, when people forget how to use a computer.
Oh,
there we go.
Doesn't seem to matter how often you do it. It's just.
I know.
That's perfect.
All right.
I can see it really well.
All right, great. Let me take you through. I'll just take you through a couple, and I will flick through some slides, which does look somewhat unprofessional, but let's pretend I've got it all together perfectly for the time we've got. One of the things we are looking at, I should say, in this study, is the idea of value in cancer care, and particularly in precision medicine. Often when we think about the value of these drugs, these treatments across a range of cancer types, tumor types, and a range of therapies, they're often talked about in terms of exorbitant costs for the government or for corporations. They're often talked about in terms of life expectancy, written by doctors about their patients. But what we really wanted here was to talk to people about how they viewed the value. What is the value of some of these drugs and these recent innovations in cancer? And here is a really great example of the kind of narratives that can emerge. And there are myriad narratives, but this one I really want to highlight, from a woman living with NATS, who said, "It was worth giving up 7 months of my life to have the benefit of 2 years of no treatment. I know this sounds really weird, but I was glad to have the opportunity with PRRT to actually fight NATS." Before the next round of lutein, she says, she's thinking, "I'm glad I'm having another chance to have a go at the bastards because of the endless sitting and watching and waiting, and it gives me a chance to get at them again." Now, for many of us, even for me with my limited experience, that cancer as war, cancer as battle, this is a very common narrative, we get that. But actually what's happening here, for me at least, is the idea of waiting and watching and three monthly scans is heightened with NETs, to a point where when you finally get to access PRRT, it feels relieving, despite this treatment potentially coming with serious side effects. It's going to the hospital again, or the clinic during pandemic. These are really big stresses or potential stresses and risks. And yet here we have a narrative of, thank God I'm going to have a go at this, which I think is incredibly interesting. And a totally different, sorry.
So I was just going to say, when I read this quote, I just thought, oh my goodness, this has actually really nailed the sense of fatigue almost that I hear from people with NETs, where, like you said, this tyranny of the 3-month scans that can go seemingly, well, we don't know how long this piece of string is, but it's always like, will this be the scan where we can do something more about this, or am I still having to just wait for it to get worse before we can fight it?
Yes, and you've just done my job so well. We're gonna go into that as well. This idea of worsening to receive targeted treatment. Before I do, I just want to highlight this idea of giving up 7 months to have the benefit of 2 years of no treatment. And this is a recurring theme across. This is what I've been saying to all participants towards the end of our now second interviews, where I say, you've got a very specific case of cancer, very specific life around cancer, but the parallels are amazing. And the parallel here for all people living with cancer is that the conception of time changes. What is time, and what does it mean to you in what position relative to diagnosis, treatment, etc.? I think that's really, really important. Anyway, let's forget the books for a minute. Here's another one. This is the idea of worsening to receive targeted treatment. And when I got told this, I didn't quite understand it. And I'll be honest with you, I was having a shower and I was like, what does this mean? But, and I'll read a bit of the quote here. I actually asked my oncologist about PRRT because I'd read about it. And in fact, I think it was my brother-in-law that first sent me a text about saying, have you heard of PRRT? And I think I'd already sort of read about it anyway. And he said, look, at the moment, you don't have enough tumors to warrant having it because it would just be uptaken by your bone marrow. So really, in some ways, you have to wait until you're worse off to get it. But this is incredibly interesting because of the emotional toll of having to just sit and wait in it. And there's lots of writing about waiting relative to different types of chronic illness, terminal illness to cancer. And that sense of time being elongated and stretched out, and the burden of that, which a lot of people don't, I mean, I can't understand it. I'm not in that position either. It's a very unique experience of those going through disease. I think you could argue quite well there. But also this idea that you have to fit a particular box in order to receive treatment. And the frustration around that, the idea that my NETs is only treatable when it reaches X stage, but in waiting, you are actually feeling like, or putting yourself more in harm's way, or the risk increases. So that strain comes through all the time. Another example is this idea of waiting till it gets worse, which comes to influence this person's decision about whether to go into a trial. So on the one hand, you want to go on a trial, or you want to access PRRT. The oncologist is saying we have to wait until it's grown to a particular size. But then you've got competing narratives from the community around different types of approaches to treatment where a doctor has intervened at a particularly earlier point. And I'm not going to comment on the therapeutic benefit of that. It's not my field. But that idea that you're watching others experience treatment differently to you is going to impact your sense of dread and risk. And that just comes through all the time across cancer treatments, but particularly heightened for NETs.
Can you read out the bits that, because it might be quite small on people's screens. I'm just.
Oh, yes, sorry. If you're watching on a phone, I'm very sorry. It's like they're waiting till it gets worse, a little bit more worse. And that's what the woman said to me over in another state. This is a community member. She said, we left it too late. We left it too late for the PRRT. We should have done this 12 months ago. And I asked the patient or the participant, why do you think they're letting it wait? And in frustration, the participant says, Christ knows, for it to get a little bit worse, to see that there's some growth, why not attack now? I know that one tumor is growing to 10 mil. It was only 1 mil when I was diagnosed. And it's like, what are you waiting for? And that real sense of frustration, which can feel completely personal and intimate. This is my frustration. Sociology basically says that is reflective of a range of external conditions outside of our control, such as when treatment is administered, for whom, and on what basis, right? So we internalize this as frustration and experience it and viscerally, I think. Should we keep going?
Really get that so strongly from that quote, just that sense of, oh, gosh, why can't we do something now?
Yes, and that pressure. I got some more for you, and tell me if it's like if it's boring or you want to keep moving. There's lots of stuff, so you just tell me what you. This is
really interesting, and I'm seeing quite a few comments. I'm sure people could actually let us know if they're keen to hear more quotes from the people with NETs. So, you know, let's keep. I'm really interested in this because I feel like it's reflecting what I see in the conversations in our community and with my conversations with people over the phone. So it's really fascinating to see this has been drawn out by the research, and I'm looking forward to then seeing, well, what do we do with this? So, but maybe that's a little bit later in the conversation. So keep coming with the.
I got some ideas, but we'll see what you think. Here's another one.
Someone just said more, please. Yeah, it's very interesting. So we're getting.
All right.
Yep.
Great. Here's another one. So as you would all know, and as I came to learn very quickly, knowing nothing about NETs a year ago, is that the complexity of the diagnosis and what it means for you and your body and yourself is going to be different depending on who you are and you know, right? It's a very, very individualized form of cancer in some ways. And what this can lead to, for a few people at least, is an idea of being rare, individualized, and not having the cancer next door. So it's this idea that I don't have a cancer that has a clear protocol. I don't have a cancer that can be culturally or socially recognized really quickly. One of the classics is I look well and I have to explain that I have cancer, which lung cancer patients go through too, where you have to explain illness in a way that's not visual, and that's very difficult and can be painful. In this example, I'll read out a little bit. Basically, this person is being asked to take a particular drug, sunitinib, at different points based on whether they can handle the side effects. And this is because the rarity or the particular diagnosis they have means that the oncologist and the team, multidisciplinary team, are trying to figure out what's going to work for this person, but they don't have a clear protocol. So they feel like that they are an N=1, that they are, in fact, they call themselves a few times an experiment or I'm a guinea pig to them. And they don't mean it disparagingly. That's just generally what they feel like. So this participant says, it was a bit weird to have choice about what treatments I have, but it worked for me, if that makes sense. I was glad my oncologist said, do it this way. I went, yeah, fine. I thought it was a bit strange because there was no real protocol. But what they told me, what I had to do, or what they allowed me to do, were two different things. But I thought, well, he's an oncologist, so he knows what he's talking about. But because I'm a guinea pig to them, they're not going to push me too hard to do what's not going to be good for me, if that makes sense. A couple of things going on there. For us in sociology, we're really interested in power relations. It's kind of like what we do. And there's an interesting problem there where someone's knowledge of their own body and their knowledge of what a side effect is and their feeling, sensation of the line, where is the line about what side effects I'm willing to accept, is often different to a protocol. It's often different to, our perceptions of pain are often different to what a doctor might recommend at first. So with this example, where we've got no real protocol, someone having to sense whether they're being treated versus how much suffering they're feeling through side effects, mixed with this feeling of expectation they have about their oncologist, it creates this really complex, moral quandary for that patient and that person, where they have to say, yes, I tried my best, but I couldn't deal with the nausea. And then that sense that they have to kind of go, no, it's not my fault. This is the drug. I did as well as I could, versus the oncologist basically waiting to see what happens. It's a really, that is a wicked problem. That's a very complex position to be in. And the people that talk to me about this particular, I'm very just in awe of having to manage your own cancer with that much responsibilization, right? That feeling of I am responsible for whether I live or extend my life. I think that's a very big burden. What else have I got for you?
See just in the comments, Alex, that there's actually quite a lot of strong feelings being expressed by the people watching that, and so I feel like this is actually really ringing true, and it's resonating with people, that this frustration and a feeling of almost pressure that they've got to work out when's enough, or when's enough side effects to sort of jump off that particular treatment, but also, that feeling of being a guinea pig and just not really knowing. And I think that diversity of, like I said at this very start of the interview, that every net in every person is going to behave differently. And so it's really hard to compare stories for patients, but it's also really hard for doctors to kind of make broad recommendations about treatments, because everyone responds so very differently. So I'm just seeing that resonate really strongly with the group.
I think I'm glad, and I really appreciate you saying that. And you could argue that all cancers are kind of N=1 to some degree, because from your perspective, yes, I am living with cancer. I am my own person. But the kind of continuum of strong protocols classic is, and the cultural touchstone is the Herceptin breast cancer classic. This is a rigorous protocol versus this situation, which is more fluid and what can you handle. On face value, you could argue something like, you could see it as something like, well, this is up to the individual and they're empowered to make their own choice. But me being me, I see that as, well, what is the fairness and justice element here for that person who then may feel, not always, responsibilized for their own care? And is there a role for paternalism in care where a doctor or a team says, this is what we're going to do, versus I choose to do this because I don't feel nauseous today? I think that is a really important dynamic for precision medicine that I think we need to highlight more.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alex. And so important that we unravel that a bit, because just like every tumor in every person is different. What each person values and is willing to put up with and sees as a reasonable exchange of quality versus quantity of life, and the financial aspects of some of these things, there's such variation. So I feel like what you're finding out in this research is going to really help. I really hope it's going to help medical teams in working out how to talk about these therapies and how to help people make decisions in a way that's really useful.
Good. And I agree. I hope we can actually illuminate what's going on here from the adult living with cancer, and someone living with cancer as a full person, right? Which is often hard to see when you're in a healthcare system. And it's just the assemblage of people. That's what it is. All right, let me give you another one. Let me see if I can get another good one for you. Not your cancer next door. We just talked. Let me give you something else. This is a massive one and won't come as any surprise, I don't think. The idea of experiencing tumor stream inequity, which blew my mind. This person I spoke to is living with both NETs and breast cancer, and many people I've spoken to are living with a lung tumor, NETs, pancreatic NETs, carcinoid, etc. Right? So we've got the range of different things going on for a lot of different people. But what really made this conversation interesting was the discrepancy, a very real discrepancy here for one person experiencing both forms of cancer. And I'm just going to read a little bit out here. So the neuroendocrine tumor is uncommon, slow growing, and not really removable. Yet the breast cancer was removable, quite common, and fast growing, like aggressive. So it's two opposite ends of the spectrum of cancers. Because the experience of NETs and the resources available compared to the experience of breast cancer and their resources available is just, and they did this far apart. Breast cancer was so much more common, and they had the statistics because they knew about it, of which how many women were dying from breast cancer. And it was a really insidious disease and this sort of thing. But by the same token with NETs, because it was more uncommon, and then they go on to explain how it was obviously up in the air and the statistics were kind of not as strong, or they didn't feel like the data was there for the doctor to give them information immediately. But the breast cancer here, I mean, this came out in a range of ways in the interviews where people are getting immediate, obviously multiple nurses around the country specifically for this, multiple specifically targeted forms of not just medical treatment and therapeutics, but care that is not being provided for those with NETs, let alone the lack of understanding that seems to be coming through about what is NETs, right? So this person experiences both extremes on the same day. And one of the weird outcomes was being given a breast cancer hat on the one hand. Like, I know the merch thing, this is merch, and there's like life-size stands of like the famous person associated with breast cancer, and then there's NETs. So it's a very clear inequity. And I know that's kind of like, very kind of surface level analysis there, but it really goes for me, the stratification between which cancer you have and the amount of resources, the amount of cultural recognition, the amount of understanding has a real impact on your experience, let alone your treatment type. And that just comes through the entire time. Yeah. And
I think it's really important that I feel like I'm waiting for comments about what you just said, Alex, but I feel that it's important to recognise that. I think that you've observed something real that I see, a real almost anger that, actually I remember talking to one person very early on when I was a baby nurse a few years ago, and she said her NET actually, the first place it was detected in her body was her breast. So she was rural, so she was treated as a breast cancer patient for the first little while. She went to, they found a abnormality on her screening mammogram. She had an operation to take that tumor out. She got a breast care nurse. She got the yoga. She got the support group. She got all of the beautiful pink things. I think she got offered a wig and all of this sort of, it was
yes.
It was this comprehensive network, as like a whole network of support built around her, which I'm not for a moment saying that's a bad thing, because I think you know that we've seen how these things can be really fantastic for people with cancer. But what happened was that when she went back for her 6-week post-op appointment, the surgeon said to her, well, this is an unusual situation, but actually you don't have breast cancer, you have neuroendocrine cancer. And she said at the time they dropped her like a hot coal, and they were her words, and they really struck me because I remember them all these years later, that all of a sudden the breast cancer has disappeared, and the support group wasn't appropriate for her, but not only was this all happening, everything was withdrawn, but she was actually told that she had tumours elsewhere and she was going to need lifelong treatment. It was probably going to be with her for the rest of her life, and it may well be the thing that ends her life. And so her prognosis was far worse than if she'd had a simple breast cancer, and yet the support rug was really pulled out from underneath her at the time where she felt like she really needed that support the most. So I think I'm really pleased that you've noticed this from the data that you've collected from our NETS patients, because I think it is a real issue. And I
want to say agreed everything you just said, and just to go double down if I can. It's not a sense of anger; it is anger, because of the chance and the people feeling genuinely unlucky, but then entering a healthcare system that seems to value some cancers over others. And it's not a critique of the holistic care that breast cancer patients are provided. That is awesome. It's saying, why is one particular tumor stream treated in X, why this is treated in Y? What is the difference here? And the flip side of that coin in brief is that I think that's why, as far as I can tell from the small amount of interviews I've done with NETS patients, is that's why the community is so strong. Because I feel like you're responding to that lack of holistic care, and not just in like which treatment should I have, which oncologist should I see, public, private pathways, we'll get to that in a minute. It's the holistic thing of how you're feeling. Yes, I know what it feels like to be misdiagnosed for 6 months. Yes, I know what it feels like to have to explain at the family barbecue what I have, and everyone say something like, is that cancer, right? It's those small things that would really just alleviate the stress that are not being met, I don't think, by healthcare professionals for one reason or another, whether it's resourcing, recognition, etc. I think that's something we need to think about more. But it's a real thing, and I don't think it's critiquing to say so. I think it's reality, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm just seeing lots of nodding heads. If I could say,
oh, good.
I'm presuming they're nodding. I'm seeing lots of comments. Someone's just said, that's why we get together and support each other. And I think that's what we've just said the same thing essentially. So it's, again, it's resonating and ringing true for people, which is, I guess, heartening.
Yeah, and it's also like
to be, the data from the research to be reflecting what's actually happening in the world. So that's exciting.
Otherwise, I'm deaf. Otherwise, I haven't been listening. Yeah, so it's good. That's good. Okay. I know I don't want to. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got heaps more stuff. Let me show you some more.
600,000 words of it, haven't you? So
we haven't even finished the follow-up interviews yet. That's the thing.
So what was the most surprising out of all of this, Alex? I feel like you've put your finger on lots of pulse points for our NET community. What's really stood out to you, or what's been the most surprising thing so far?
Two things, if I can. Sorry.
Of course you can.
First is class and the notion of socioeconomic position. Now, I think there's an obvious sociological take on treatment pathways when it comes to discussions of public versus private healthcare.
Is it okay if we unshare the screen?
Please, yes.
So we just
No, that's good.
Yeah, because I want to, so I can see you. Yeah, so say that again.
I think when you take a sociologist on a journey into healthcare, one of the first things they're going to be like is, okay, people are receiving different forms of treatment, and not in terms of lutate or whatever. I'm talking in terms of the way they're approaching healthcare systems, the interactions, which clinics they visit, rural versus highly dense urbanized areas. Fine. What really surprised me is, particularly for NETS patients, that having to navigate and learn the healthcare system like the back of your hand is just a knowledge unto itself. So not only have you had to learn about NETS while living with it, right? You have to learn how the Australian healthcare system works, how the PBAC works, the gaps in healthcare provision, which oncologist is friendly enough to talk to you in particular ways versus a personality you might not get on with for any number of reasons in a very sensitive environment. Plus, for many people I've talked to, your significant other, family, supporter, carer, friend, you're bringing them with you, they're helping you in the room. And then the ramifications of feeling like you made a good choice or a bad choice in terms of which oncologist you saw, that complexity came through. But in another way, that idea for me, I had this idea, and maybe it's my background as well, which my position comes through all of this data because I'm the one talking to people, is I don't have private healthcare insurance. And it's always been like, I can't afford that. But then when you hear people who have private healthcare insurance say things like, I had it all my life and I've sacrificed that money to pay that. And then when it came to, the gaps were huge. I got absolutely, it doesn't sound like much, and they're always hedging because they're, it's hard to hear and it's hard to say out loud, but the healthcare companies made money off my position after I've been paying for 40 plus years, for example. And it's just, having to navigate not only the healthcare system, but the profitability of global healthcare whilst you're going through disease. My God, that is hat off, massive respect for dealing with that complexity as well. Also, Medicare. I don't think we've got another hour, but this idea that, and in fact, in which genomics is unsettling, which I find incredibly interesting, of if you don't have cancer X in this particular box filled in by oncologists, therefore you can't access some forms of treatment on the PBS. That's changing dramatically owing to creation of genetic subtypes across different types of tumors, right? So we might see that change in the next 10, 20 years. But right now, having to think about whether to ask your oncologist, can you put me as another patient, or can you figure out a way for me to access drugs because NETs isn't recognized in XYZ? That kind of navigation really shocked me, to be honest. Another thing which came up, if I can just ramble one more time, is the idea of trials. And this very base level idea I had about trials and the ethos of participating in science and the willingness of people to put themselves through potentially harmful new treatments for the benefit of others. And the admiration I have for that. And at the same time, recognizing the power relations of the trial. So I could ask any of the people I talked to that went on trial, and I think I could get a majority saying, I perceive that I received better care on the trial. And that just makes my mind go, is it the cash? Is it the care? Is it what is going on here? And then it's also a perception of like, if I don't go on the trial for a particularly rare type of cancer, this actually might be limiting a potentially promising drug for me. So that level of risk analysis often felt very personally, often made totally individually or in relation with your family. That is absolutely just insanely interesting to me. I mean, and also the threat, right? Because you've got this pending threat of time running out. It's like, I have to participate in this trial, or, to potentially extend my life, or to give me some kind of, as our first participant said, a weapon by which to beat back these tumors. And at the same time, all of the risks. You've seen some of these trial forms; they're like 30 pages. I can't read it. Like, what is this? That's a big burden to put on someone. And they're the things that have moved me. We can talk about the pandemic if you want to, but actually, those are the things which really got me.
Yeah, and I hearing you talk about all of these things. And thinking about you with your PhD and your university education, and for me too, as a health professional with 30 years of experience, it sort of blows our mind, and I find these things complex and difficult to get my head around. But I'm also acutely aware that I'm talking to people who their day jobs driving a bus or on a grader out on the road somewhere in rural Western Australia, or they're not necessarily they haven't spent their life educating themselves to get their heads around this sort of complex medical and emotional kind of combination of information, it's so challenging for our patients. So once again, I'm actually, you know, I feel my blood boiling about some of the things that you're describing, because I'm going, yes, yes, yes. But also I'm going, yes, because I feel like it's great that someone's listening. And I'm really excited to see this being captured in a rigorous research kind of way, so that perhaps we can create some change and some improvements. And I wondered if that might be, I feel like I've forgotten all of the questions I was going to ask you, so I'll have a look at my notes in a minute. But what would be your hopes leading out of this research, if you could sort of look at all of this data and then have a really big, powerful, fat, unicorn-coloured magic wand? What would you do?
God. First is the classic, it's equity of access. If I could make somehow a system which recognizes people as full people amongst all their complexity, whereby the tumors were understood not to be them, but are part of their lives, and recognize that complexity minimum, that would be the first one, right? So I know with any bureaucratic system, we have to be reduced to a symbol or a number of some description to keep things moving. But my God, the damage that does sometimes, and the untold damage that does. The other thing, a couple of other things I would do is what COVID has actually inadvertently done, all right, is, for me anyway, from my little angle here, is inadvertently exposed a lot of the things that oncology, from the patient's perspective, has taken for granted for a long time. You're going to travel 8 hours for a 1 hour meeting, which is probably going to be, 20 minutes, and you're going to wait 6 hours in a waiting room, waiting literally in a monk-like status, just silence, or with Channel 9 in the background, God help you, and you're sitting there waiting. And it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, there are ways that we can communicate now that don't require you having to drive and spend your money on accommodation. There should be more support there for you, et cetera, for rural patients, particularly and regional patients. At the same time, that idea that we're all going to move to telehealth and not have this personal interaction or this face-to-face interaction is also detrimental, I think, as well, because of the importance of presence and being with each other. So that is something I think, I mean, that's just one of the things that COVID has really, for me, exposed, this idea that we actually need to have a chat about what caring relations should look like for someone living with NETs or a particular type of cancer. It actually gives us a bit of a refresher. The idea that I could come in and fix it, I think, would be not premature, but also kind of, I don't want to condescend to anyone either. I'm not trying to say I can fix it. But for me, it really is about, what got me really is this idea of national healthcare and Medicare. And Greg Hunt got massive props, which throughout many of the interviews, particularly from lung cancer patients, because a lot of targeted therapies have moved onto the PBS under Greg Hunt. And as a health minister, that moved to, as quickly as possible, for a massive bureaucracy, put things on the PBS and make things accessible for as many people as possible, I think is a good move. And that's me saying that, someone who's cynical of government, all right, generally. But at the same time, the discrepancy between someone on a pension paying $6.60 for their shot versus someone, who has a super paying $6.60 is still a massive discrepancy. I think there should be better support basically across the board, regardless of which tumor stream, or regardless of whether you're retired and on the pension versus superannuation, for example. That's a big one. What else have I got for you? I mean, I feel like we need to talk more, to be honest, because I feel like if you're dealing with disease in all of its complexity, and you have a 10-minute consultation with someone that you've been waiting for 3 months, that's a lot of pressure to put on that conversation for both you and your medical professional. There's no way they can live up to what you need in that moment. So the importance of having really strong human connections, even psychological support, familial support, and having those relationships is emphasized by this work. And I think ways that we can really assist that, I think, is where we should be aiming as well. Not just put the onus square on oncology. I think it's actually recognizing that living with cancer is actually a complex event, and it touches all of your relations, and ways that we can train each other to be better at supporting each other, I think, is what we should do. Vague, I'm sorry, but
awesome.
That's where I'm at.
Awesome. And I have to read you out a quote. I'm going to read you out two. Oh gosh, how many quotes do I read out?
Are there any jokes? Did anyone make any jokes about the bike or the serial killer wall?
There's no jokes yet. But, here we go. Here's your opportunity.
Where are you guys at?
Someone's just said you're having to fly 3,000 kilometres to find doctors who understand this disease is not easy. And I think that, you've been talking about that. But I just want to say also, look, there's obviously so much work to be done. And, your wish list of magic wand dream items is enviable, even in a country so well developed and with such a comprehensive healthcare service. I think you don't have to hang around our neck of the woods too long to find the gaps in what the existing structures do for our patients with NETs. But can I just say on behalf of the community how refreshing it is to hear a researcher who is so energised and interested and engaged with the issues that our patient community have been experiencing. And I can just see this almost this collective sigh of, oh my goodness, someone listened and someone got it. So
good.
I think that's really powerful too. And someone did say, we want to clone him. So Alex, that's the next step of the advanced laboratory part of this research. I know that you started off being qualitative, but we're going back to basic science and we're cloning you.
Cloning me.
So that
my wife would lose it. My dog would love it.
Your dog would, I don't know.
He'd be stoked.
You can't have enough
people
for a dog, can you?
Walk me every minute. And on that, I want to thank the community. I want to thank you for having me and for your backing of the project and for everyone taking the time to talk. It can't be easy to talk about this stuff. I think the Zoom, as I said, is quite a big obstacle as well. But everyone came at it with such honesty, trust in us, and relish for sharing what's going on. And I just want to thank you very much for that. We owe you. And I'm glad if any of it's mapped onto your experience, then good. That's what we do this work for. I really appreciate that.
That's well and truly been very loudly endorsed by the people listening today. So thank you so much. Someone else, I'll stop reading out comments in a minute, but there's a very busy conversation going on in our Facebook group who are watching, and just someone said, thank you for being so empathetic.
Gotcha. How hard is it?
Well, you got a lot of bits of data there, 600,000 words of transcription. So I think hats off to you for sticking with that, sitting with that data when it is really complex and there's a lot of it. And it's not just NETs too, that you're looking at other cancers. So there's a lot of, that represents a whole heap of effort on your part, and our patient community very grateful to you for pouring that energy into the work. And someone's just said, can you come back? So we'll see how we go.
Well, I finish. We should actually have sharper findings, more sociological, beyond description into I know I did some interpretation, but really theoretical stuff. By the end of this year, we'll have multiple things on the boil. So I should be able to give you something else if you'd like.
Maybe we'll have an encore of an encore. You'll be like Dame Nellie with more farewells.
You guys will have 9 months to come up with some better jokes about the bike and the wall. And I just feel like you're not keeping up your end of the bargain.
Challenge accepted. We can do that. We can work with that.
All right, good.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us. It has been really, really fascinating and encouraging and maddening all in one. But I feel that you've nailed so many of the issues that are very current for our patient community. I know that's going to be very powerful and encouraging for people that they'll feel heard and represented, and that we'll look forward to seeing the publications that flow from this research and inviting you back maybe in about 9 months' time when we've just dated our joke stash for you.
Oh, I didn't mean to bully the community. I'm just saying, it's pretty easy shot. All right, thank you so much.
There's a lot of unicorn and toilet humour with Nets. So
I appreciate that.
Don't say you weren't warned.
No, it's actually, no, it's very solid poo jokes the whole way through, and I appreciate that. How else are you going to talk about it?
Exactly. Sometimes you've got to laugh. Hey.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Fantastic. Alex, I'll let you press your little red button if you would like to. I've just got a couple of tiny little housekeeping things to update the community on before we finish up today. But thank you so much. There's lots of people saying thank you. It's been awesome to hear from you. So
all right,
wonderful.
See you, Kate. Thanks, team.
Thanks,
Bye.
Alex. Wow, such energy from Alex, and I'm looking forward to getting into, there's a lot of comments today, so I'm looking forward to coming back and reading those. Just before I finish up today, I do want to just do a little bit of housekeeping for us. I popped in the group earlier this week, which has just gone so fast with Easter and everything, just to let you know that I am on leave next week. So the phone will be going through to message bank, and the emails will you'll get a little out of office on the emails to say, you know, I'll be back on, what was it, Monday, I should have had this written down, the 19th of April is when I'm back in the office after today. So with those sorts of things, obviously, please never contact me if you're bleeding to death. I don't want an email about it. I want you to talk to your healthcare team, but especially next week. If you're not well, then please use them as your first port of call. But please know that if you email me or phone me, I'll definitely get back to you as soon as I can. And you're wonderful, everybody, about being patient when there's a bit of a delay with those replies. So I try and get back to people as quickly as I can. So once I'm back in the office on that Monday, I'll get back to everybody. But that does mean that next week, our Facebook Friday is going to be hosted by our own wonderful Simone Layden, who many of you will know as the CEO of Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia. So I know it's always pretty special to have Simone drop in and do a Facebook Friday chat. She often has got some really interesting insights to talk about in terms of what's going on from a national perspective with advocacy and government and, you know, trying to get the wheels moving on things like research projects and funding and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm really happy that Simone's available to talk to us all next week. I know that you'll be gentle with her because you are gorgeous people. And I'll be back on the following Friday. The following Friday, I'm actually going to do Facebook Friday with just me on the 30th of April, and I'm open to a range of topics. I've got a lot on my list that I could talk about. We might do a sort of a second chapter on the Back to Basics one that we did a few weeks ago, because that was really popular. But I've also got quite a few other things up my sleeve that I'm itching to tell you about. So I'll look forward to seeing how the conversation emerges. I beg your pardon. I've just skipped a week. That's a couple of weeks after. When I get back, the 23rd of April, you can tell I need a holiday, can't you? The 23rd of April, so that Friday week. So next Friday we've got Simone. The 23rd, we've actually got Dr. Jazz Samra, who is very well-known upper GI surgeon in Sydney. I know he's operated on lots of your tummies, and he's got a very prominent reputation worldwide as being a surgeon who's passionate about working surgically with people with NET. So I am super excited about that one. The following week, you can take it or leave it. If I get back to basics, that's great. But yes, Jazz is coming on the 23rd in a fortnight. So that's enough plugs from me about Facebook Fridays and things like that. The only other thing I just wanted to say is that next week, if you're part of our support group database, you'll get an email from us with a survey. So lots of you who have been part of our face-to-face support group network will know that with COVID, everything had to go on Zoom, and support groups were no different. So we are in the process of planning for a return to face-to-face groups, and we're still hoping that with the vaccine rollout shenanigans that we'll still be in a position by around the June round of meetings that we'll be back in our meeting rooms, being able to at least, you know, elbow bump with each other, if not anything more close. But I know that fulfills a really important role for heaps of people, and Zoom, we can't pretend that's not challenging. So we want to get some more information from people about how you feel about getting together face to face again with you, feel confident because of all the things with COVID. But also we want to get a real sense of how you feel about if you don't feel like going back face to face is going to be your thing, then how might we make that work with using Zoom as maybe as a hybrid model, or maybe channeling into our existing Zoom monthly group or something. If we've got more people than we've got space for in that group, then we can maybe branch out and do another one. So it's complex. It's like everything over the last 12 months. We've been inventing the wheel we didn't know that we needed to have. So no doubt we'll be learning lots along the way, and we might try some stuff and we might find that the stuff doesn't work and we'll be going back to the drawing board. But with anything that we do, we need the feedback in order to know whether it's worthwhile persevering with it. So please keep a lookout for that survey coming up, and hopefully it'll be early next week. We'll put that out. So we'll definitely put a link in the Facebook group, as well as send it out to everyone via email. So thanks very much in advance for taking part in that. I am going to love you and leave you. It's been wonderful having everybody along today. I know that was quite a detailed conversation with Alex, but I thought it was when he sent me some of the slides of some of the quotes from that research, I thought, oh my goodness, that really seemed to be quite on the mark with what I hear and what I know we talk about in the group. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I will look forward to seeing you, not next week, but the week after when I'm back from my break. Thanks, everybody, and take care. We'll see you soon.